My MIL hijacked my baby shower to announce I wasn't ready to be a mother. Now she's never met her granddaughter. My mother-in-law's name is Colleen. She has been a problem since the day I met her. When my husband Felix brought me home for the first time, Colleen looked me up and down, turned to Felix and said, "I thought you said she was tall. I'm 5'4". That was her opening line. Not hello, not nice to meet you. A comment about my height. Over the 4 years Felix and I dated, Colleen inserted herself into every decision. She had opinions about my hair, my clothes, my job, my cooking, the way I loaded the dishwasher, and the way I folded Felix's shirts. She once refolded an entire basket of laundry I'd done at her house because I folded the towels in thirds instead of halves. She didn't ask. She just pulled everything out and started over while I stood there watching. When Felix proposed, Colleen told him the ring was too small. She said it in front of me, at the dinner table, the night we announced the engagement. She held my hand, looked at the ring, and said, "Well, there's always the anniversary upgrade." At our wedding, she wore an ivory dress. Not cream, not champagne, ivory. Not close enough to white that 3 of my bridesmaids asked me if she was doing it on purpose. She was. When I got pregnant, I thought maybe things would change. I thought a grandchild might soften her. It made her worse. The moment we announced the pregnancy, Colleen decided this baby was her project. She told us the baby should be named after her mother. She told us which hospital to deliver at. She told me which prenatal vitamins to take because the ones I was using weren't the brand she trusted. She said trusted like she had a medical degree. She works at a furniture store. When we found out we were having a girl, Colleen went out and bought an entire nursery set without asking. Crib, changing table, dresser, rocking chair, bedding, curtains, all in a French countryside theme. Yellow roses, lace trim, little lambs on everything. She had it delivered to our house while I was at work. Felix came home and found 6 boxes stacked in the garage. The problem was that I'd already designed the nursery. I'd spent 2 months picking everything out. A woodland theme, soft greens, foxes, mushrooms, birch trees on the wall. I'd already painted the room, ordered the crib, hung shelves, and put up a handmade mobile my best friend Rosie made with little felt animals. I told Colleen thank you, but we'd already finished the nursery. She said that sounds dark. I said it's a forest. She said babies need brightness and warmth, not trees and fungus. She came over the next day, stood in the doorway of the nursery, and said it looks like a camping trip. She told Felix he needed to talk to me about making better choices for the baby's environment. Felix told her the nursery was finished and we both loved it. She said he was whipped. She didn't take her furniture set back. She left it in our garage and told us it would be there when I came to my senses. My baby shower was planned by Rosie. She did everything. Rented a venue at a garden center, ordered food, made decorations by hand that matched the woodland theme, little fox centerpieces, green tablecloths, a banner that said, "Welcome to the forest, baby girl." Rosie spent weeks on it. 40 people were invited. Colleen was one of them. Colleen showed up 45 minutes early carrying 3 large shopping bags, yellow rose table runners, lace napkin rings, lamb printed plates. She was redecorating the baby shower. Rosie told her politely that the theme was already set. Colleen looked at the fox centerpieces and said these look like something from a hunting catalog. She put her things back in the bags but left them on a chair near the entrance, like a backup plan sitting in the corner. Guests arrived. Everything was going fine. We played games, people ate, I opened gifts. Colleen sat in the second row with her arms crossed for most of it. When I got to her gift, I opened it in front of everyone. Inside was a framed mock-up of the French countryside nursery she'd wanted, with a note that said, "For when you're ready to give her something better." I read the note in my head. I put the frame down gently and said thank you, Colleen, and moved on to the next gift. That's when she lost it. Colleen stood up from her chair like she'd been waiting for this moment. She turned her whole body toward the guests. She pointed at the decorations, at the fox centerpieces, at the banner Rosie had spent hours making, and she said, "Look at this. Look at what she's done. Mushrooms and foxes for a newborn. This is what happens when someone who isn't ready to be a mother gets to make decisions." She said it like she was giving a speech, like she had practiced it. The room went so quiet I could hear the ice settling in the drink pitcher on the gift table. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. My hands were shaking against my lap. Then Rosie stepped forward. She stepped right up to Colleen and said, "Colleen, you need to stop." Colleen looked Rosie up and down, the same way she'd looked at me the first time we met, and said, "You helped her with this? You encouraged this? Some friend you are?" Rosie didn't flinch. She said, "I think you should leave." Colleen laughed. This short, sharp sound. She said, "I'm the grandmother. I have more right to be here than you do." So I stood up. My legs were shaky, but my back was straight. I said, "Colleen, you just told a room full of people that I'm not ready to be a mother at my own baby shower. That is the last thing you will ever say about my parenting." Colleen rolled her eyes like I was a kid throwing a fit. She turned to the guests and said, "See, this is what Felix deals with." Nobody agreed. The silence was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Then Felix walked forward from the back of the room. He said, "Mom, stop talking." His voice was low, but it carried. Colleen said, "Felix, I'm trying to help." Felix said, "You just humiliated my wife in front of everyone we know. That's not help. That's cruelty." I will never forget the way he said that word, cruelty. He said it clearly and simply like it was a fact he had finally accepted out loud. Colleen's eyes went wide. She said, "You're choosing her over me?" Felix said, "I'm choosing my family. You need to leave." Colleen grabbed her shopping bags and headed for the door. She stopped, turned around one more time, looked directly at me and said, "When this all falls apart, and it will, don't call me." Then she walked out. The door closed behind her and the room was so still you could hear the air conditioning running. For about 10 minutes, people tried to bring the energy back. A few of my cousins came up and hugged me. Felix's aunt rubbed my back and told me she was sorry. Rosie squeezed my hand so hard I could feel her pulse in her fingers. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Then my phone buzzed. The family group chat. Felix's side, aunts, uncles, cousins, all in one thread. Colleen had sent a message meant for Felix but accidentally sent it to the whole group. It said, "She turned you against me. I hope you're happy when she ruins that child." I watched the notification dots pop up one after another as every member of Felix's family read it. Every single one of them now had proof. In Colleen's own words, words of exactly who she was when she thought only Felix was listening. That message changed everything. I told Felix that night that Colleen was not welcome at the hospital. He didn't argue. He didn't hesitate. He agreed. Over the next 2 weeks, Colleen launched a full campaign. She called Felix every day, sometimes twice. The voicemails cycled between guilt and anger like she was flipping a switch. One would be her crying, saying, "I carried you for 9 months and this is how you repay me." The next would be cold and clipped, saying she was sorry if she upset anyone but someone had to say the truth. Sorry if she upset anyone, like the problem was other people's reactions and not her actual words. She never once said sorry to me. Every message was directed at Felix. I didn't exist in her apology attempts because she wasn't actually sorry for what she did to me. She was sorry it didn't work. Felix listened to the first few voicemails, then he stopped. He'd see her name on his phone, let it ring, and set it face down on the counter. When Felix stopped answering, she started texting his cousins, telling them I was isolating Felix from his family. 2 cousins reached out. One supported us. The other suggested I just let her apologize and move on. I told both the same thing. She announced to 40 people that I'm not fit to be a mother. There's no moving on from that. Felix said she had a chance. She had 40 witnesses. Then one Saturday morning, the doorbell rang over and over, fast, like someone leaning on the button. Colleen was on our porch holding a gift bag, tears already going. Felix told her she couldn't be here. She said, "You're going to keep me from my own grandchild?" Felix said, "You did that yourself." Then he closed the door. That night, she sent a 5-paragraph email about sacrificing everything to raise him alone, working double shifts, giving up her 20s and 30s. Through all 5 paragraphs, she never mentioned me by name. She called me your wife, over and over. Your wife has turned you into someone I don't recognize. Your wife is controlling every part of your life. At the end, she wrote that if Felix didn't fix this before the baby came, their relationship might not survive. Fix this or lose me. Felix said she already lost. That night, we sat at the kitchen table and wrote a message together. We went back and forth on the words. When we were done, it said, "Colleen, until you acknowledge what you did at the shower, apologize directly to both of us, and commit to respecting our decisions as parents, you will not be part of this baby's life. This is not a punishment. This is a boundary." We sent it from Felix's phone. It showed as read. She never responded. 3 weeks of silence. Then I went into labor 3 days early. Felix called his cousin to let the family know. Within 20 minutes, Colleen knew. 4 hours in, a nurse came in with a careful look on her face. A woman at the front desk claiming to be the grandmother. Not on the visitor list. Turned away. Not leaving. Sitting in the waiting room. Felix closed his eyes. He said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "She's not getting in this room." Colleen sat in that waiting room for 7 hours. 7. I know because the nurses kept coming in. They were kind about it. Always careful with how they said things. But every time that door opened and I saw a nurse with that careful look on her face, I knew it was about Colleen. The first time, about an hour after they turned her away, a nurse came in and said quietly, "She asked me to tell you she just wants to hold the baby for 1 minute." I said no. The nurse nodded and left. A couple hours later, she was crying, saying she'd apologize to whoever she needed to. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." She'll apologize to whoever she needs to, like it was a checkbox to get through the door. Felix looked torn for the first time through all of this. He said quietly, "She's my mom." I understood. She was the woman who raised him alone, who worked double shifts, who packed his lunches. She was also the woman who told 40 people I wasn't fit to be a mother. Both things true at the same time. I said, "And this is our daughter." She announced to 40 people that I wasn't fit for this. She doesn't get to walk in here like nothing happened. Felix went into the hallway. I could hear voices through the door, his low and steady, hers higher and climbing. He came back with red eyes. He told her to go home. She said he was making the biggest mistake of his life. He looked at me and said, "No, but I'm right." He said it like it cost him something. And it did. Because being right about your own mother not being safe enough to be in the room when your daughter is born is not the kind of right that feels good. It's the kind that sits on your chest like a brick you can't put down. Rose was born at 11:47 that night. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy. Perfect. When they put her on my chest, I forgot every single thing that had happened in the last 9 months. I forgot the shower. I forgot the email. I forgot the group chat message. I forgot the doorbell ringing over and over on a Saturday morning. All of it went quiet. It was just me and this tiny warm weight on my chest, with her eyes barely open and her little fingers curling around nothing. Felix was beside me. He had one hand on the baby and one hand on my arm, and he leaned in close and whispered, "She's got your nose." I laughed. It came out watery and tired and real, and it was the first laugh I'd had in so long that didn't have something sharp hiding underneath it. It was just happy. Just that. Rosie showed up about 20 minutes later. She came through the door holding flowers in one hand and wiping her face with the other. She was already crying before she even saw the baby. She stood at the bedside and whispered, "You did it." For a little while, everything was quiet and warm and exactly what it was supposed to be. Felix in the chair next to me, half asleep, Rosie on the other side, Rose in my arms, breathing in that tiny, fast way newborns breathe. Then my phone lit up. A text from an unknown number. "You kept a grandmother from meeting her granddaughter on the day she was born. I will never forgive you for this." I looked at it for 3 seconds. Then I turned the phone face down and looked at my baby. Felix blocked the number without me asking. Rosie stayed the night. Colleen went home alone. 2 weeks later, things felt almost normal. Felix was home on paternity leave. He figured out the bottle warmer before I did. He discovered Rose liked being held against his chest with her ear over his heartbeat, and she'd fall asleep in under 2 minutes. Rosie brought food every few days. My mom flew in and stayed a week. She'd sit in the rocking chair while I nursed Rose at 3 in the morning, and she wouldn't say anything. She'd just be there. Through all of it, Colleen was silent. Felix said one night, maybe she finally gets it. I wanted to believe him, but I knew Colleen. Women like her don't just get it. They regroup. I said, or she's planning something. I was right. The following Sunday afternoon, a single knock at the door. Polite, almost gentle. Felix opened it and his whole body went still. Colleen was there, but not alone. Next to her, gripping a walker with both hands, was Felix's grandmother. In her late 80s, small, frail, cardigan buttoned to her neck. She looked up at Felix with watery blue eyes and said, "Please, I just want to see the baby before I can't anymore." I looked past her to Colleen, arms crossed, small smile on her face, the kind of expression someone makes when they know they've played a card you can't beat. She hadn't hadn't apologized. She hadn't acknowledged a single thing. What she'd done was load a woman in her late 80s into a car and bring her to our doorstep like a prop. A human shield. That was what 2 weeks of silence had been for. Not reflection. Strategy. I stepped forward. I looked at his grandmother and made sure my voice was warm. We would love for you to meet Rose. Why don't you come in? Then I looked directly at Colleen. You can wait outside. Colleen's smile disappeared. She said, I brought his grandmother here. She's nearly 90 years old. You're going to make her walk past me while I sit on the porch? Felix said, Mom, she gave you a way in. A real apology. You chose to bring Grandma instead. We helped his grandmother inside. She sat on the couch and I placed Rose in her arms. She started to cry. The good kind. The kind that comes from seeing something you weren't sure you'd get to see. She held Rose for 20 minutes. She touched her little fingers and said she's beautiful. She looks just like Felix did. Felix smiled a real smile for the first time in weeks. When she was ready to go, Felix walked her to the car. Colleen was in the driver's seat staring straight ahead. She didn't look at him. Didn't say a word. Felix came back and sat on the couch staring at the floor. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and his hands hanging between his legs. After a minute, he said, she used Grandma as a bargaining chip. He said it quietly. Not like he was surprised. More like he was saying it out loud to make himself believe it. Because believing your own mother would use a woman in her late 80s as a tool to get what she wants is not something that comes easy, even when you've watched her do 100 other things that should have made it obvious. I said, and it still didn't work. That tells you everything. Felix was quiet for a while. Rose made a little sound against my chest. One of those tiny baby noises that doesn't mean anything, but still makes you hold them a little tighter. Then he said, I'm done waiting for her to change. He didn't say it with anger or frustration or even sadness. He said it like a fact. Like something he had finally finished figuring out after working on it for a very long time. Like a door closing that was never going to open again. I put my hand on his back and I sat with him, and I didn't try to make it better because some things can't be made better. They can only be accepted. For 4 months, Colleen was completely silent. Then she played her last card. The day of Rose's baptism. She wasn't invited. She showed up anyway. 20 people were there. My family, Felix's 2 supportive cousins, Rosie, close friends. The church was quiet and warm. Sunlight came through the windows and landed in soft patches on the wooden pews. Rose was wearing a white gown my mother had sewn by hand, tiny stitches along the hem, and a little ribbon at the collar. Then the back door opened. Colleen walked in wearing a pale blue dress, holding a wrapped gift, smiling like she'd been on the guest list all along. She had planned this. Every head turned. She walked down the center aisle slowly, confidently, heels clicking on stone. She sat near the front, set the gift on her lap, and whispered to Felix, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to be here for my granddaughter's baptism. Felix said, you weren't invited. She said, a grandmother shouldn't need an invitation to her own granddaughter's baptism. There it was. The same line she'd been using for months, repackaged for a new setting. I'm the grandmother. I have rights. The rules don't apply to me. I stood up calmly. I walked to her row and sat down right next to her. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me. I said, you have never apologized. You have never acknowledged what you did. You brought Felix's grandmother to our doorstep as a prop. You sent me a threatening text the night my daughter was born. And now you've shown up uninvited to her baptism because you believe the rules don't apply to you. She opened her mouth to defend herself. I said, I'm not finished. She closed her mouth. For the first time in 4 years, Colleen sat still and listened to me. I said, look around this church. These people are here because they were invited, because they respect us, because they earned their place in Rose's life. You are not one of those people. And every time you force yourself into a moment that isn't yours, you prove exactly why you aren't. Her chin trembled. Her eyes were wet. She said, I'm her grandmother. Her voice cracked on the word. I said, then act like one. A grandmother apologizes. A grandmother respects boundaries. A grandmother doesn't hijack showers, send threats, or weaponize elderly relatives. You want to be in Rose's life? I gave you the roadmap months ago. You chose your pride instead. That's not my fault. That's yours. For the first time since I'd known her, Colleen had nothing to say. She looked at Felix at the front of the church. Rose was asleep in his arms, tiny fist curled against his chest right over his heart. Felix looked back at his mother. The expression on his face was the saddest thing I have ever seen. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was the face of a man looking at his mother and wishing, one last time, that she was someone different. He said quietly, go home, Mom. Colleen looked at Rose for a long time, long enough that I thought she might say something, long enough that I thought she might try one more time, but she didn't. She picked up her unopened gift. She stood up from the pew. She smoothed the front of her pale blue dress, and she walked back down the aisle. She didn't slam the door. She didn't yell. She didn't turn around for one last parting shot the way she had at the baby shower. She just walked out of the church and pulled the door closed behind her. The creak of the hinge, the click of the latch, and then quiet. The officiant, who had been standing patiently at the front the entire time, looked at Felix, then at me. I nodded. The ceremony began. Rose slept through the whole thing. She slept through the prayers and the water and the words that were spoken over her head. She had no idea that her grandmother had been there and gone. Afterward, Rosie found me by the side door. She said, are you okay? I was holding Rose against my shoulder. She was awake now, blinking at the sunlight, making those little sounds she makes when she's content. I looked around the room, Felix talking to his cousins, my mother folding Rose's blanket, Rosie standing there being exactly the friend she had always been. All of these people who showed up because they wanted to, who respected us enough to let us be our own family. I said, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Rose is 14 months old now. She crawls everywhere. She pulls herself up on the coffee table and stands there wobbling with this huge proud smile like she just climbed a mountain. She says something that sounds like "dah" when Felix walks into a room. She laughs when Rosie makes funny faces at her. She has Felix's eyes and my nose. Colleen has never held her. She has never seen the nursery. The soft green walls are still there. The birch trees are still painted on the wall. The felt mobile Rosie made still hangs above the crib, and Rose reaches for it every night before she falls asleep. The boxes of French countryside furniture are gone from the garage. Felix donated them to a family shelter 3 months ago. He didn't tell Colleen. Last week I found one of the lamb-printed plates from the baby shower bags in the back of a kitchen cabinet. I don't know how it got there. I threw it away and closed the cabinet.